I never use the term art and science, brand and performance. I only use the term meaningful and measurable. And it is the balance of the meaningful and the measurable where you really have the marketing magic.
Today, I'm chatting with Dana Marineau, CMO of Rakuten.
Rakuten,
the largest e-commerce company in Japan.
people are still needing to buy things, whatever it is. Why wouldn't you, during this time in our lives, save money while you're doing that?
Rakuten's diverse portfolio spans e-commerce and more, including a fast-growing U.S. division focused on its unique cashback for shopping program. Dana has held senior marketing positions at Credit Karma, Trilogy Software, and notably 15 years at software company Electronic Arts.
And often it doesn't go okay. I mean, you don't want to hide that. You don't want to sweep it under the rug. You want to say, oh man, this thing was really messy. But listen to what we learned and how we took that learning, it made this thing amazing. We unlocked TikTok, for example, right? You have to be able to have a culture of learning and testing and failing and messing up so that that is the way you unlock the new thing. Rakuten means optimism. So one of the things you'll hear me talk about throughout our marketing is you will feel that optimism, that joyfulness in all of our marketing. Why? Because that is...
I'm chatting with Dana Marineau, CMO at Rakuten. And Dana, it's an interesting challenge that you had 3.5 years ago. You come into the company and it's a sizable Japanese company, well-known, 25,000 people, but brand awareness is really, really low outside of Japan and especially in the US. So how did you first kind of wrap your head around that, where you're creating something that's new, but you're trying to, pay homage to a heritage? It has to match the legacy, yet you have kind of a blank canvas to work with.
Ben, thank you for having me. And actually, it's as if you worked here because you painted exactly the picture I walked into. The one thing you forgot is it's May of 2020. So it's COVID. So okay. I get here and all the things you've outlined, heritage to a very large Japanese company, very low brand awareness in the US, almost zero, and trying to figure out how to bring this amazing idea to the US because it is a very sizable Japanese company, as you said. And here in the US, no one had ever heard of Rakuten. So yes, started May of 2020. Lot of things happening in the world that are strange and foreign and unknown, like everyone working from home. And I immediately decided what was best for this moment in time, which is not always true because I've worked with some incredible ad agencies in my career. But I decided that it was important for this moment in time at Rakuten when truly it was an unknown brand that we built an in-house team. And that is both the brand and the creative side and the growth and performance and analytics side. So trying to build that team over Zoom is a question for another time. But the thing that you have to figure out is, what is the soul of this brand? And to be honest, because Rakuten was unknown in the US, and by the way, it is unknown because Rakuten had acquired a company you probably heard of called Ebates. And that was sort of the original basis of our members was Ebates. And we had many millions of members who quite loved that Ebates brand. But once you rebrand to Rakuten, no one's ever heard of it before. So what do you need to do? You need to define the soul of this brand. And that is everything from copywriting, voice and personality, identity design, logo design. I mean, everything you can think of that is building the foundation of the brand because no one's ever heard of this. And so we spent, again, over COVID, over Zoom for at least a year, the first, I'd say, year and a half, building the foundation, redesigning the app and the website, redesigning the identity, the color palette, defining a voice and tone and personality with a little bit of a wink, I'd say some sense of humor, like redefining who is Rakuten in the US because it had never existed before. So we spent quite a long time.
Well, and how did you do that? Because I think that's, challenging in any environment, certainly challenging because your team is operating over Zoom, but it's also challenging because you need to take the essence of this Japanese brand. And I don't know, or you can tell me what you did if you'd like, go over to Japan, talk to a lot of people, listen, see it in market, sort of experience it, maybe pull out insights from that. Maybe they've had already built up brand books, guidelines, guardrails, all of that. But when I hear you talking about color palettes and it sounds like you had really an open playbook. So was that just from the higher ups at Global saying, go create and reimagine? Or was it something in this area of COVID, or it was such a new market that they sort of said, you have room to play? Like, how did that sort of work with that transition from Japan to the US or other parts of the world?
Okay, amazing question. And I'd say that the best answer is a little bit of both. So it is very important to us and to our global mothership in Japan that we hold on to that heritage and we pay homage to that heritage. So there are things that we do certainly in our company that pay honor to our Japanese roots. So minor things, we wear our badge over our hearts, as you can see I'm wearing, and that is part of the Japanese custom. We have a weekly Monday morning meeting. It is called Asakai, every single Monday. So there are things that we do in our company that are very much of the tradition of our Japanese brand. Now, your question is about our marketing. And I would say to you that they did give us some leeway as it relates to what is right in the US market, as opposed to what is right in Tokyo or what is right in other parts of the world, to, I would say, play with and expand upon what is true of the brand in Japan. So you're right. The brand color palette in Japan and in Asia is a crimson red. And they did allow us, by the way, not an easy conversation, but they did allow us to bring a different color as our, let's call it master color, into our palette, which is a purple color that we felt would work better in the US specifically. But there are all kinds of things like we don't touch the logo, the word mark. That is very specific to Japan. Can we change its color? Yes. Can we animate it? Sometimes, but there's things that we just don't touch, and we know very clearly within the brand guidelines that you're asking about, there are things that we can play with and expand upon. There are things that we just don't touch. So, they were very open to, here is what is happening in the US market. Here's what we think is going to work best. And they were open to those discussions every time. Some of the things we were able to do, some of the things we are not, but we definitely pay, honor to our Japanese heritage. And part of that, by the way, Rakuten means optimism. So one of the things you'll hear me talk about a lot throughout our marketing is you will feel that optimism, that joyfulness in all of our marketing. Why? Because that is the soul of our brand, whether you're in Japan or in Barcelona or in California. That is the soul of who we are.
Well, and that makes sense. Another challenge that was happening in 2020. So we were trying to make sense of what was going on. We didn't realize how sort of serious a pandemic we ended up being in. But it was also accelerating a lot of, digital business, digital commerce, open. If you remember, go back into your mindset that like open rates on emails were increasing. People were attending webinars before. There was a little fatigue of all of this. So all this was going. You're trying to build this, but you relate to commerce and shopping as what Rakuten does. You're kind of in a wave of increasing, but you don't have presence. So how much of your time was spent like riding the wave and just like, we'll figure it out later. If we screw up something now, that's okay. We can go back and correct it because we start to see these kind of metrics taking off, versus how much of it was, no, let's do this in the proper order. We define, our central, if we do a branding exercise together, right? Decide the central unified idea of our brand, and we do stakeholder interviews, and we define that. From that, we get the brand manifesto, and from that, we start rolling out. We go through the whole process.
Were you doing this? I love it. I'm like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, were you doing it in the sort of proper methodical order, or you were doing it more like, let's do as needed because there's no rules here. We don't know what's going on.
Okay, so here's the genius to your answer, and yes, you could not be more right, is luckily for us, we were building both sides of that equation, both the proper brand strategy that you are referring to in every possible way, doing it the right way. And as I said, we're also building a growth team, a performance team, an analytics team. So we actually had the luxury of being able to do both those things at the same time. We had the growth hacking team like messing around with social and with email, with push notifications, like testing and learning at the same time as we were also trying to build and refresh this brand. So actually, I do feel quite lucky that we were able to, I think they say like build the airplane and fly the airplane at the same time. We were able to do both of those because you're right. 2020 was extraordinary when it came to e-commerce and shopping, and people were shopping online more than they ever had before, newer than they ever before, discovering stores than they ever had before. And the beauty of Rakuten is every single purchase, you get cash back every time. Whether you're buying a pair of jeans, whether you're buying a houseplant, whether you're buying sunglasses or some running shoes, whatever you're buying, you get cash back every single time you buy. And so people were discovering new stores on Rakuten and discovering that they could get cash back on the athleisure they were wearing and some new towels to go, to wherever they were going. So I do feel like we had the advantage of really doing proper brand style, brand guideline work to define the soul of the brand, define the personality point. And because so much shopping and e-commerce was happening more than ever before, we were able to learn and test and understand, like listening to the data and figuring out, oh, okay, athleisure really is a thing. Put Nike and Athleta and Under Armour front forward as we merchandise this, as opposed to maybe some of the luxury items that, those stores weren't doing as well for all the reasons we know during the pandemic. And then, by the way, a year and a half later, flip. People are ready to go out again, merchandise differently. Like we can use the data of how our members are shopping to see that.
And how at this point in time, how was the target of? I know you pay a lot of special attention now to young millennial, in particular young millennial women. That is part of your core audience. Was that the target then as you entered the market, or did that evolve from that, or back kind of in progressing in 2020?
Evolve. So when I arrived in 2020, the core target was, I would just say women. Women are, you've heard that term, the CEO of the household, doing a lot of the buying, doing a lot of the shopping. That did not change with COVID. So women, and I would say to your question, probably a slightly older woman, I'm in that zone, I would say sort of the 35 to 50 was what I still today, I would call our core buying shoppers, right? Young millennial women came about via a pretty significant research study that we did around up and coming shoppers and what is our growth audience and where do we see shopping going in the next, let's call it 3 to 5 years. And millennial women was the growth target for us. And I would also say to you in another conversation, Gen Z is a growth target for us, right? So, but women is the core target, has been, always has been. We just evolved into sort of more targeted strategies related to millennial women as to where they shop, how they get inspired, which is what caused us to spend more time and understanding and money even in influencers and in social media and in TikTok, as opposed to some of the more traditional methods, which of course, by the way, we still do, whether it's linear television or connected television and email. But we have a pretty serious media mix model that we do our, media buying and media investments on. And the growth audience is one important segment to our overall audience.
I see. And so what you're trying to, just to paraphrase, I mean, and maybe use a sports analogy. I mean, you're skating to where the puck is going, but you have to kind of skate to where the puck is. You're doing it at the same time, but obviously growth is important. You have a core audience. So you have a marketing mix that reflects that. Some of that marketing is targeted like where that puck is now. Some of it is like where you want it to go. And what's the split of that? Would you say like, I don't know, 60% growth orientation, 40% kind of like your existing core, or does it go further? 70% growth, 30% existing core? How do you split that up?
I love this question. I want to say to you that it's 50-50, right? 50-50. We spend a lot. I think so. Like, of course, I'm going to go ask our VP of growth and she'll tell me exactly, what it is. But I want to say that we spend a lot of time. So, and I also would tell you, it depends on the time of year, right? So it depends on what's happening in the environment. Now, obviously, right now we are working through a recessionary environment and inflation, and how that changes what we say, our messaging, and what people are worried about. And so, depending on the audience, depending on the medium, the channel, the platform, I think that percentage changes. I mean, it's sort of an older generation that is watching linear television, right? And a younger generation that is watching connected television and watching television on YouTube and watching video on TikTok. So I think the answer to your question is I want to say it's a 50-50, but it really depends on where we are, what channel we are in, what platform we are in, and what messaging we're using, and what mechanism. Are we using influencer? Are we using a broadcast moment like the Super Bowl? I think it depends, but I want to say to you, mentally, it feels 50-50.
Okay, got it. Well, and maybe in terms of focus, it feels 50-50, right? Just like just mental bandwidth of where your attention is. And of course, anytime you're dealing with shopping, commerce, e-commerce, you're going to have seasonal swings, right? The Q4 is going to be big. There's going to be a lot of there. And then you mentioned the Super Bowl because there's still, it's in terms of building awareness, if you can afford the Super Bowl, there's
doesn't
still
get better than that.
A lot of creative people, aspire to do it like the Super Bowl ad, but also it's sort of a kind of big and expensive hammer. But if you can do it, very few channels where you can get like that many, eyeballs at once, and that much awareness at once. So you put a lot of thought, I know, into a Super Bowl campaign that kind of pull based on this insight around kind of 90s nostalgia. Talk about that and sort of how that grows from this in your recent Super Bowl spot.
So one of the things I love that you just said is that you didn't say Super Bowl spot, you said Super Bowl campaign. And I appreciate that about you because that is what we aim to do. I from the beginning, I always said to our executives, and Rakuten had never done a Super Bowl before, right? So when you broach that topic and you talk about it, they think, oh, the 30-second spot in the broadcast of the Super Bowl. That's what they go to. And my whole thing was, nope. That is one piece of it. And I know you have talked a lot about the concept between paid and owned and earned. And the Super Bowl is that big paid thing, right? It is not cheap. And you're spending a lot of money on the actual media of it, right? The time and the production of it, right? So that's a big paid thing. But when you do the Super Bowl well, it's the owned and earned that really shine. And I would say to you, what I am most proud of course, the spot itself, that was, by the way, that was our second Super Bowl. The spot itself, I think, was absolutely genius in every way related to the nostalgia of the 90s that was very prevalent last fall, specifically around the 90s returning. And what is true about Rakuten and our growth audience, young millennial women, which is they are inspired and motivated and shop around influencers. That's how they get their information. That is how they inspired on what to shop. And if you ask yourself, who is the original, the OG shopping influencer? It's Cher Horowitz from Clueless. And so that all sort of came together.
So the Clueless movie we're talking about, Alicia Silverstone.
Yes.
There's a lot of kind of movie lines, one-liners, kind of went into the cultural lexicon from this movie, made Alicia Silverstone a star, but also she embodied kind of the influencer shopping in an era before around shopping, before influencers was a thing. Really.
Exactly right. So you tap into that. 90s is already coming back. Clueless is already one of the number one movies on Netflix as a note. And you tap into that shopping influencer piece. And you ask yourself, if Cher Horowitz, that character, Alicia's character, was around in 2023, of course, she would get cash back on every purchase. Of course she would, right? So that was the premise of the idea. And again, back to my point is, it's not just about that 30-second spot. It was amazing. I think so. But the press coverage, the PR, the YouTube views, we had 25 million views of the spot on YouTube before it hit air, right? So that says to you, it sort of flips on this concept around paid and owned and earned, and how does that work? And what's the daylight on that thing? And yeah, of course, the paid, very important. Obviously, we wouldn't have had this other piece if it weren't for that one paid piece, but the owned and the earned, the views on YouTube, the views on TikTok, the press coverage alone, we had 600 pieces of coverage before the Super Bowl. That just kind of says to you, okay, we hit it. We hit that zeitgeist for the Super Bowl.
Well, and as you were selling this through internally, when you said this is a campaign, what were the other pieces? I understand a lot of like the views and everything else, but what was the strategy involved in the other related pieces in terms of whether it's channels or timing or other things? How did you sort of sell that through as a plan?
So of course, the CFO and the CEO and anyone you have to sell this to is going to be, what's the ROI, right? That's the first question. Well, how do we know it's going to work? Okay. So you have to have that conversation about building brand awareness, to our previous conversation, and what the metrics look like the day of, right? That week, the day of the Super Bowl. And then what we sold, the premise we sold was long-term. And I will say to you, and the reason we were able to do a second Super Bowl, so that Clueless idea was our second Super Bowl, is we were able to report back one full year later, right? Let's call it February to February, what metrics move. And we were able to move over the year some pretty amazing metrics. So not only from like just the top of the funnel, were we able to improve our brand awareness index by 5 points. And someone like you, you're like, whoa, that's a lot in 1 year, 5 points. Like that's pretty amazing, right? Mm-hmm. So that's just the brand awareness metric. And then there's, we had a 10% lift in buyers between the Super Bowl and our next big shopping event, which was the following May. And we had a 20% lift for over the year in what is reactivated buyers, which is people who used to shop at Rakuten but haven't come back in a year. So I can point to those long-term metrics and say, that's why you do the Super Bowl. Now, the day of course, search volume was up. Of course, sign-ins and sign-ups were up. Of course, app downloads were up, like all those day one metrics, but it's nothing compared to what it does for your brand over the year.
And how do you then extend on that and look at other seasons? Like, how do you think about the time between, you got your Super Bowl in kind of early part of the year, you have your holiday shopping season, you have a lot of time in between that. I mean, you want steadiness, predictability, but you also want moments and spikes and there are other things. How do you think about other holidays or even like Amazon has Amazon Prime Day, which I just think of as, Christmas in July, right? Let's just bring Christmas in July.
That's how they brand it. They've done a good job because that's how they brand it.
Let's also be counter-cyclical, right? And let's give ourselves a wave of sales that's opposite to when we typically get it. So that, and of course, that's really based on Singles Day in China, which Amazon's,
which is in November.
Which is in November 11th, of course. Yes, as well.
November 11th,
so how do you kind of think about seasonal marketing without drive periods, counter-cyclical drive periods? How does that enter your thinking?
Okay, I love this question. So yes, we have every quarter what we will call a tentpole moment. So you've named 2 of them, right? So it's Super Bowl in our Q1 is a big tentpole moment. The next one is in May. I just described to you, we have this big shopping event we call it the Big Give Week, which is 8 straight days of 15 to 20% cash back on every store, right? On hundreds and thousands of stores. So that is, we go from one tentpole moment to another. Q3 is our sort of back to school zone. And then Q4, of course, is Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Ooh, my AirPod fell off. So in between those times, though, you're right. We can't just have people shop 4 times a year. So we do create, to your point, we do a big campaign around Amazon Prime Day. Because, by the way, not everyone loves Amazon. People need to shop. People need to buy things. But maybe people want an alternative. And on those 4 days surrounding Amazon Prime Day, Rakuten, like Walmart, like Target, like many other brands, also has a big sale or also has big discounting or big deals. And we put many hundreds of our stores on 15% cash back around Prime Day. We also we make, maybe a little bit of like making a mountain out of a molehill. Like people shop on President's Day. People shop on Veterans Day. We call it Singles Day. Also, we have other moments that we create to make sure, to your point, that we have a steady business throughout the year, not just hoping and wanting people to shop only 4 times a year. They need to shop through it. They need new cleats for their son. They need a new pair of sunglasses because they broke. People need to shop. People need to buy dog food, whatever it is. And we want to create the most joyful possible shopping experience for them, which is you buy something and you instantly get rewarded. So you are right. We have big moments across the year, but we also try to make some of those smaller moments rewarding so that people choose Rakuten over some of those others you may have mentioned.
Well, and we think of it in terms of, and I don't know if you think of it this way too, we think of it in terms of like booms, sparks, and beats. So booms are those, I think, your tentpole moments, right? Those really big things we're doing. Sparks are pretty big, right? Like not quite as big as those booms, but they're also kind of filling in. And then beats, we just want that like that heartbeat of things that were just constantly relevant and timely and responsive. And sometimes it's things we can't predict, right? Something happens, something trends. We think about that in terms of our clients. So are there any since you sort of have your finger on the pulse of sort of shopping and commerce, are there underrated moments in the season that other marketers should think more about that are just like non-obvious ones? Probably a lot of people are listening like, Mother's Day, we do quite a bit. Yeah. Valentine's we do quite a bit.
Valentine's Day.
But are there others that you think are going to grow or underutilized? Heck, Black Friday and Cyber Monday weren't always a thing, right? It's, so what should we be looking at?
So it evolves, right? So the way people shopped during COVID when they were home is different than how and where and how often they're shopping now in this recessionary environment. So to your point about, what you call it, sparks, what was the last one? Beats.
Boom, sparks, and beats. Yes.
The beats are much harder today. People are saving money, needing to save money, worried about money. And so the beats are a lot harder today than they were even 2 years ago, when we sort of call that post-COVID period drunk on shopping, right? Like
okay.
It kind of felt that way. And so I would have said to you, then maybe a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, those moments that you just mentioned, whether it's Mother's Day or Valentine's Day or Columbus Day or Memorial Day, like those beats were sort of sparks then, right? Because people shopped. So I actually think it's related to what's happening in culture. Is it an election year? Is it not? Is it recessionary? What's the consumer spending index? I think the beats and the sparks kind of evolve about what's going on. I think, to your point, the booms, the temples, those are there. Like they're established now. And every brand has a little bit of a different version of that. Of course, Black Friday, we created one in May, which is a huge boom for us, big give week. But I think brands can sort of create those known tentpole moments. The beats and the sparks evolve, is my opinion. It's not that I can just point to everybody buys during Mother's Day. I think it depends on what's going on in the environment, because we found those to be different over the last 3 years.
Well, and I'll give you an example of ones that surprise people. So one of the things, we Top is a global marketing agency. We have that, but some of these people are surprised that we own a number. We have a digital media sort of division. We own a number of website properties. One of them is called National Today. It's at nationaltoday.com. It has 10 million visitors who celebrate holidays. So it kind of lists all the holidays that are out there, over 10,000 plus holidays. And sometimes people get surprised by this. Like you talk about sort of in the sort of the time of being, thinking about money, saving about money. What kind of holidays are related to that? Well, National Transfer Money to Your Daughter Day. That's on October 6th. I don't know. This is what people's reaction. They're like, oh, do I need to either tag my mom or tag my daughter and say, ha ha. So we had a million shares of that day, that post. It's a little day, but there's something about, hey, we're kind of in this uncertain environment around money, and transfer money to your daughter day. Hey, mom, are you celebrating this year? And so those kind of moments that capture this mood. I'll give you some other ones that have certain kind of funny names.
I love that.
National Respect Your Cat Day does really well. Respect
anything
your
pet
cat.
Related.
But also the respect. Yes, absolutely. And I'll give you one for 90s nostalgia. We created a lot of holidays for brands and a lot of PR agencies hire us. But we created Mean Girls Day. Mean Girls Day.
I need to know more about this.
Okay, this is on October 3rd, because there's a famous line in the movie about October 3rd. And we did this years ago, and it still is a thing every year. The power of, classic Lindsay Lohan.
It's so hot right now. Hot right now.
Yes. So my only point to this is that there are these moments, there are big ones we know, but then there are sometimes these little ones that strike the right chord. If it's the right mood, if it sort of fits the culture, you can create them. And that's really like any type of business that wants more seasonal relevance. I think you can, like traditional sort of advertising marketing workflows, right? Like right person, right message, right time. We call it calendar-based marketing, which is the opposite. Right time, then we do right message for the time, and then right person.
Look at Barbie right now. Barbie right now has created
unbelievable
a huge marketing moment. I mean, the number of headlines I see, like the MVP of the year is Barbie's marketing team. You're like, yes, right? But how many brands, by the way, including Rakuten, who did a big sort of pink related or Barbie related promotion because of this huge movie, and because everyone wanted to be a part of this cultural phenomenon. Every brand wanted to associate if they could. In our case, of course, on our platform, we have thousands of stores, and people were buying a lot of pink and pink costuming, and either to go see the movie, just they wanted to be part of something. So all these brands wanted to pick up on them. That's exactly right. That's not something necessarily you would have planned in your brand strategy calendar for the year, right? You just want to pick up on that cultural moment and be a part of it.
Right. Well, and then I think one of the interesting things, and I don't know, we can talk about the culture you've built at Rakuten as a good segue into that. Some of those emerging cultural trends, moments, rapid response, whatever you want to call it, just taking advantage of it. One of the things that's easier to say than do is you have to have a culture, usually if you're going to be fast and quick, that encourages experimentation, that says it's okay to make mistakes, and that says we're going to go fast and we're going to learn. But obviously within maybe, the bigger brand you are, the more there are guidelines, guardrails, compliance, lawyers, all of this. And they're like, we don't want to be sued by Barbie's people. She has people. Don't get sued by her, right? So how do you think about that? Because if you want to be fast and quick, you've got to be by nature kind of experimental or willing to, try some things and learn and get better and better. At some point, you got to start. How do you think about terms of your team and encouraging that culture?
So speaking of culture, there's a very famous scene in Ted Lasso, which is, of course, a cultural moment.
Okay, show on Apple Plus, and if you don't know, watch it. Inspirational, but like American coach who doesn't know anything about soccer or football, European football, goes over and becomes a football coach, and an inspiring thing about how he motivates people. Yes.
Yeah. So in the very first episode of Ted Lasso, he is speaking to a football player who's made a mistake, and he says, "Be a goldfish." And all that means is goldfish have a short memory. And he says to him, "Hey, you've made a mistake. No big deal. Don't let it plague you. Don't let it hold you back. Try again." That idea, that mantra is something we talk about all the time at Rakuten and specifically in our marketing department, which is it is okay to make a mistake. It is okay to have a failure. It is okay for something to not go as well. Be a goldfish. And I, by the way, I have a monthly marketing meeting. We get our entire team together, and I require that at every single marketing meeting, someone gets up and talks about something that didn't go so well. It's called a goldfish presentation. And they get up in front of the entire division and talk about something that didn't test well, something that didn't go well, something they thought was going to be amazing that wasn't, or something that was amazing, but there was some kind of snafu, and get up there and embrace that the mistake or embrace that it didn't go as well and say, and here's what I learned from it. And here's what I'm going to teach all of you about from my learning. And you're right. You have to ingrain that in the culture because we need people to act fast. We need our growth hackers and our growth marketers to go quickly, test something on the iPhone, test something with email, test something with headlines in our email. There's so many things that we can learn from, and you have to be ready that it's not going to go okay. And often it doesn't go okay. And you have to be able to, you don't want to hide that. You don't want to sweep it under the rug. You want to say, oh man, this thing was really messy, but listen to what we learned and how when we took that learning, it made this thing amazing. We unlocked TikTok, for example, right? So you have to be able to have a culture of learning and testing and failing and messing up so that is the way you unlock the new thing. In our case, we've unlocked all kinds of things by just trying and learning and testing and messing up and saying so and being a culture of people who say it's okay to make a mistake.
Well, and besides this, I guess, goldfish moment in your monthly meeting, what other, for other CMOs listening, what other kind of mainstays of your sort of culture or team building efforts do you think important or influential in what you've created at Rakuten?
I think it's really important to celebrate wins. I know some companies and some leaders are better at this than others. I think it's really important to stop for a moment and recognize a win. So our all marketing meeting is often, the many presentations of look at the new design we've done for this new feature. Look at the new campaign we're about to run for holiday. Look at, we'll get our brand strategy team up there and go, here are these learnings that we have uncovered about young millennial women or Gen Z as relates to how they buy luxury, for example. Like, we do a lot of win celebrations and a lot of learning. Like, hey, Apple has a new privacy policy. Let's hear about that. So we do a lot of learning. We do a lot of sharing wins. As I've said, we have a goldfish presentation to share something that didn't go so well. I also am a person who really believes in feedback, right? So I try to ask for and give a ton of feedback as relates to this big company meeting or in any sort of daily meeting I'm in. We talk about feedback. We talk about character. We talk about integrity. We talk about taking chances and taking risks. As part of our monthly meetings, we do part of that as well, which is what's on our mind right now. What are we worried about? Oh, our members are really worried about money. Let's talk about that. So we try to do that kind of stuff in the meeting as well. It's about a 90-minute meeting. We try to cover some wins of Goldfish. And so it's something we've learned and like something we're feeling.
I see one. And what is the nature of feedback? I'm reminded of it's kind of like I'm trying to think of the source of this. It's an old adage marketing story where like the young up and coming marketer goes into the CMO's office and presents the campaign, and the CMO says, "Is that the best you can do?" And he's like, and then so the marketer's like, "Oh, okay, shoot, okay, they didn't really, he or she didn't really take that too well," and so they go back, they work on the campaign, they come back in the office and they show, "Hey, look what I've done now." CMO says, "Is that the best you can do?" And then so it goes back, works hard, optimizes this, optimizes that, come back, shows the presentation again, and CMO says, "Is that the best you can do?" And the person finally says, Yes, that is the best I can do." And the CMO says, "Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we were doing our best." Yeah. And that's the story. Yeah. So I don't know what that says about feedback, but what is the nature of feedback? That are we talking like micro little morsels and lots of things overall? Is this like, some people like radical candor of us like, hey, that's going to, kind of concept in the book. By that time, that's what we're going to do. Is this performance reviews? We're just going to like lean into that. What is the nature of feedback?
So I'm glad you brought up radical candor, because that is a philosophy I believe in. An amazing book by Kim Scott. And the concept of radical candor is simply building trust. And I do think teams and cultures are based on authenticity and trust. And so for me, and this is the way I choose to lead, is I am constantly giving feedback. All the things you just mentioned, whether it's someone presenting in a meeting, someone said something really smart in a meeting, someone helped out another person and is not taking credit for that, whatever it is, I am constantly giving positive, affirmative feedback throughout the day, every meeting, right? You did great. I love that, for example, because when it comes the time, and there is always a moment where you have a piece of feedback that is perhaps more critical in nature or perhaps more constructive in nature, you have got to build the trust with that person first, so they know you are an advocate, you are there to support them, and you always have their best interest in mind. And that kind of more critical feedback doesn't land as well if you haven't built that trust over time. So I am constantly giving all kinds of feedback about how meetings are going and how presentations are going and how emails are sent and whatever it is, so that people feel great, people feel good, because there's going to be a moment when I have to say, "Hey, can we talk about that?" And that lands a lot better when you've built that authenticity and trust over time. So that is my personal philosophy, and it is embedded within the culture of this team.
Well, and I think, it also helps too to hire people that respond well to feedback, right? That is like, that doesn't mean you have to be defensive about it. Doesn't mean you have to like stand up, right? It's like that, like you can take it well. The other thing I think that is a little bit underrated as a skill is I'm not the creator of this term. I've heard it many times before, but it's like, be a positive gossip. What I mean by that is like, "Oh, did you hear that Dana did had this really interesting insight about this campaign?"
I've never heard that.
Right? Like do the opposite, not the negative, but the positive. "Did you hear that my producer, Tom, is amazing at making podcasts and doing this? And did you hear what he did, this new thing he did on the top CEO podcast? That was amazing." Right? Whatever it is, be a positive gossip, spread good things.
I'm taking that, Ben. Thank you for that. I'll trademark you. I'm
not the creator of it. I've heard it somewhere. I don't know where, but yes. And so it's so interesting, those little things. But I think your broader point was just, you kind of build up this like trust balance in your bank account. You build it up, you build it up. That's a little bit of Stephen Covey there. But if you build it up in what's in your bank account, then you can make a withdrawal when you need it, and it's built up.
Exactly.
And I think that's important to remember.
I love that. I'm gonna use that one. I love that.
Well, good. We love what each other are doing. That's good. Dana, take me through, to wrap up, where is, all of this headed for us in marketing? That's a big question, but let me make it a little bit smaller, which is, you've talked about experimenting. You've talked about being relevant. You've talked about, hey, 90s nostalgia's, trending, call up Alicia Silverstone, all of that. Yeah. Where are we headed in the next 3 to 5 years? What are you looking at now? Do you care about Chat GPT and generative AI? Do you not? I'm throwing out things out there, but what are you thinking about for what's coming?
So we are always thinking about where our women are shopping, how they are shopping, what is inspiring them to shop. So to your point, that is constantly evolving and watching. And yes, we have started to do different types of things on TikTok, of course. We have started to explore pretty new live shopping. So to us, it's where and how and what is the message to inspire our growing audiences, whether it's young millennials or Gen Z and how they shop. And we are doing sort of the big research and the sort of micro research on what's happening with that generation. How are they shopping? What are they buying? Why are they buying? What is inspiring them? Who is inspiring them to understand? And that for me is the what's new. So sure, yes, we too have been using AI, related to our subject line testing. Yes, of course we're doing that. But what I am constantly thinking about and what keeps me up at night is related to what's going to be the thing that motivates our growth audience. What is the thing that we say? Where do we say it? How do we say it? And that's what we are always experimenting with. And again, with that learning mentality, we allow ourselves to try, right? We try the Super Bowl. We try Fashion Week. We try TikTok. We try special influencers. We try special music, whatever it is. We are constantly thinking about what inspires and motivates someone, a young woman, to shop.
And do you think, how would you say you're thinking about kind of recessionary times now, or it's even unclear if we're in a recession? Obviously, that affects the shopping impulse a lot. How are you adjusting your investment? Are you doubling down in places? Are you pulling back in places? How are you just thinking about it overall right now?
I'd say the thing we've spent the most amount of time on is the messaging. The idea of savings, the idea of how to save, the idea of being a smarter, savvier shopper is what we have been really focused on, because people are still needing to buy things. And I would say to you, you need to buy something, whether it's cleats for your son, a pair of sunglasses, a jean jacket, your Uber, whatever it is. Why wouldn't you, during this time in our lives, save money while you're doing that thing, right? So that's the most important piece for us, is the messaging and how we say that in which channel, of course, is we pay attention to. But it's less about investment up, investment down. It's more, where are we speaking to our members and to our newer members or our hopeful members, and what are we saying that's going to get them to want to try Rakuten and start their shopping with Rakuten? Because I would say to you, very few people would turn around and say to you, no, I don't want to save money. People want to save money, right? That's not something, we know that people want to save money, especially in this moment. So what we've really been focused on is how and where and what we say to inspire them to try Rakuten or to do more of their shopping on Rakuten.
And final question is, what in the next 2-3 years are you working on personally as a CMO? Is there anything that you'd like to get better at? Is there a new superpower you'd like to add to the mix? Is there something else that you're trying to develop, a certain knowledge or skill? Where are you headed personally, and what are you working on now?
I am a marketer that is born of brand, born of creative, born of storytelling. And, I did that. I was at Electronic Arts for 15 years and really honed that brand and creative storytelling skill. And I went to a startup called Credit Karma in 2016 to learn the performance side, to learn the growth marketing side, to learn, and I'll use the term, the science side. I never use the term art and science, brand and performance. I only use the term meaningful and measurable. And it is the balance of the meaningful and the measurable where you really have the marketing magic. So answering your question is, I want to be as good as I possibly can in both sides of that. I grew up in the brand and creative and the story side, and I'm always refining and learning. And mostly because the growth side, the performance side is always evolving. It's always changing. So keeping up with those changes, keeping up with data analytics and marketing mix models and keeping up with AI changing the landscape. Like I have to keep up with that ever evolving in a way that isn't true as much on the brand and creative side because it's in my DNA. So I am always trying to learn and learn and learn. And I have, very purposely, I have people who are so much smarter than I am on our leadership team to teach me. I learn from them every day, both on the brand and creative side and on the marketing analytics side, so that I can be as smart as I possibly can in both sides, because I think you need to have both the meaningful and the measurable to be a great CMO.
According to Dana Marineau,
the key to successful marketing lies in the harmonious blend of meaningful storytelling with measurable results. It's not just about numbers or flashy campaigns, although that can help at times. It's about building trust, authenticity, and a culture that thrives in both creativity and analytics. As Dana says, the M in marketing stands for meaningful storytelling combined with measurable results. This philosophy has not only shaped Rakuten's brand reinvention in the US, but it has also become a guiding principle for her leadership style. Like Dana, many CMOs and senior marketers can find inspiration in the idea of optimism, a concept that's at the core of Rakuten's identity. It's about believing in the future without ignoring the realities of the present, plus a sense that what we do today matters. Embracing feedback, celebrating wins, taking risks, and maintaining a balance between the art and science of marketing can lead to extraordinary results. So be trendy without chasing trends. Be data-driven without getting lost in the numbers. In the end, regardless of the strategy or tactic, marketing is about connecting with people, truly understanding their needs, and inspiring them through a unified vision. For Top CMO, I'm Ben Kaplan.